The first mistake the aliens made was assuming humans would stop screaming when they ran out of breath. They didn't know about adrenaline, or how panic could turn into stubborn defiance, or how some people could laugh in the face of terror simply because silence would have been worse. When Captain Elira of the Threx Dominion ordered her prisoners to be tested, she thought the fragile bipeds from Earth would break quickly. She was wrong. Jace Holland had been in more ridiculous situations in his 28 years than he cared to admit, but this one took the prize. Shackled to a chair that looked like a dentist's nightmare, surrounded by 8-foot-tall reptilian soldiers in black exoarmor, he found himself grinning. Not because he wasn't terrified, he absolutely was, but because grinning at monsters had always been his default setting. His friend Mira, restrained on the slab beside him, shot him a glare that could have peeled paint. "This isn't funny, Jace." Her voice trembled, though she tried to keep it steady. "Not funny? Mira, we're about to be part of a galactic science fair. That's hilarious." He tilted his head toward the armored Threx scientists fussing with glowing instruments. "Come on. They're taking notes. We're lab rats. You've gotta laugh." Mira bit her lip. She was a medical officer from Earth's interstellar exchange program, small-framed, sharp-eyed, and infinitely more sensible than Jace. Where he carried humor like a shield, she carried caution like a scalpel, precise, calculated, necessary. And right now, her caution told her that they were in trouble deeper than either of them had ever imagined. The Threx Dominion didn't capture people to negotiate. They captured them to test. And testing usually ended with the subject being recycled into nutrient paste. A towering Threx officer stepped forward, his scaled hide catching the cold light. Captain Elira's eyes, vertical slits of molten amber, scanned the humans like she was already dissecting them in her mind. Her voice was gravel dragged across steel. "You are the first of your kind to be tested. We require endurance data. We will push your bodies and minds beyond safe thresholds. Resistance will not alter the outcome." Jace wiggled his fingers against the restraints, wincing as the alloy cuffs bit into his wrists. "So, you're basically saying we're crash test dummies?" Elira frowned, clearly not understanding the Earth slang. Mira groaned. The machines hummed to life. Strange bands of energy wrapped around their bodies, pricking every nerve. Jace felt his muscles spasm, his jaw clench, his vision flicker with static. It wasn't pain exactly. It was worse. It was like his body was being rewritten, molecule by molecule, and he didn't have a say in it. Mira screamed. The sound echoed against the sterile metal walls. She'd always been strong, tougher than people gave her credit for, but this was different. This wasn't surgery or medicine or pressure in the field. This was violation. "Vitals holding," one of the Threx scientists rasped, adjusting a dial. "Increase intensity." Elira leaned closer, studying Jace. "How long can it endure?" Something inside Jace snapped, not physically, but mentally. He chuckled through gritted teeth, his laughter bubbling like a cracked dam. "Lady, you're in for a surprise." That was the thing about humans. Pain was terrible, yes. Fear was natural. But humans had a habit of pushing past breaking points simply because someone told them they couldn't. And Jace Holland had never been good at listening. The energy surged again. His veins felt like molten wires. Mira shouted his name, her voice ragged, but he laughed harder, choking on the sound. The Threx exchanged uneasy glances. Their data pads blinked warning symbols. This was not the reaction they had anticipated. "Stop fighting," Mira hissed through clenched teeth, her face drenched in sweat. "You're making it worse." "I'm not fighting," Jace wheezed. "I'm winning." The restraints hissed as if offended by the word. Hours passed, or minutes. Time fractured under the endless waves of pressure. The Threx increased intensity in increments designed to break the toughest of their own species. Muscles should have torn, neurons should have fried. Yet Jace remained conscious, swearing and laughing in equal measure. Mira, though straining and trembling, clung to life beside him, using sheer willpower and a stubborn refusal to give the Threx the satisfaction of watching her collapse. "Unacceptable anomaly," One of the scientists snarled, tail lashing. Their systems should be failing. They adapt, Alira muttered, her voice tinged with something that might have been respect, or irritation. Fascinating. Jace forced his head up, blood trickling from his nose, grin still plastered on his face. You're damn right we adapt. That's what we do best. Mira wanted to smack him for taunting the people who held their lives in razor-sharp claws. But at the same time, a spark of something dangerous flared inside her chest. Hope. Because for the first time since they'd been dragged onto this ship, she realized something. The Threx didn't understand humans. Not really. The test shifted. Cold flooded their bodies, then searing heat. They were plunged into illusions meant to terrify, forced to relive nightmares stitched from their own neural pathways. Jace found himself reliving the crash that had killed his brother, the fire, the choking smoke. He staggered through it, heart pounding. But when the flames reached for him, he raised both middle fingers at the simulation and laughed until the fire bent around him and dissolved into static. Myra's trial was subtler, more personal. She was placed in a perfect hospital ward, her patients dying one by one, their lives slipping through her hands no matter how she fought. Despair clawed at her throat. But instead of surrendering, she began whispering their names like a litany, holding each memory tight, refusing to let the Threx steal even that from her. The machines registered it as resistance. She knew better. It was defiance. Alira watched from the observation deck, her jaw tightening. Their limits, she murmured. They should have reached them. Jace caught her gaze through the glass, grinning with bloody teeth. News flash. We don't have limits. The room went silent. For a heartbeat, even the machines seemed to hesitate. The Threx scientists muttered frantically, struggling to interpret readings that made no sense. Vitals spiking yet stabilizing. Neural responses looping but refusing collapse. By every law of Threx physiology, the humans should have been dead 10 times over. Yet there they were, exhausted, broken, but alive. Jace leaned toward Mira, whispering hoarsely, "Told you this would be funny." She almost laughed despite herself. Almost. The experiments ended abruptly. Not because the Threx had finished, but because the ship itself trembled under external force. A jolt knocked instruments off their tables. Sirens blared in an alien pitch. The Dominion cruiser was under attack. Alira snarled, snapping orders. The soldiers rushed out, leaving only a pair of guards behind. The scientist hesitated, torn between finishing the test and obeying their captain. Myra's eyes darted to Jace. She didn't have to say a word. He was already thinking the same thing. Chaos was their best chance. The guards paced near the exit, weapons ready. The restraints holding Jace and Mira clicked with automated locks, impossible to break by brute force. But Jace wasn't planning brute force. He flexed against the cuffs, testing their give. The ally didn't move. But the chair wasn't bolted down. "Mira," he whispered, eyes gleaming despite the blood and exhaustion. "On 3, lean left." She frowned. "What?" "Trust me." She hesitated, then nodded. 1, 2, 3. They threw their weights sideways. The chairs toppled, crashing to the floor with a metallic bang. The guards whirled, weapons raised. But the noise of the attack outside muffled the sound. They shouted in their guttural language, distracted for a crucial second. Jace writhed, rolling his chair closer to the fallen instruments. Shards of glass and metal littered the floor. With effort, he managed to press the edge of his cuff against a jagged fragment, sawing furiously. Sparks flew. Mira copied his movements, grimacing with each scrape. The guards noticed. One step forward, raising his rifle. Jace looked up, eyes wild. "Hey, big guy! You ever seen a human breakdance?" He jerked violently, flipping his chair again. The guard paused, confused. That was all the time Mira needed. Her cuffs snapped open with a sharp crack. She grabbed the shard and slashed at her other wrist, freeing herself fully. The guards realized too late. Mira lunged, stabbing the shard into the nearest one's throat. Black ichor sprayed. The second raised his rifle, but Jace rammed into his legs with the chair, toppling him. Mira grabbed the weapon and fired. The alien crumpled, armor smoking. Panting, Mira rushed to Jace, shattering his cuffs. He groaned, stretching his arms. God, I hate chairs. Always so restrictive. She stared at him, shaking. We just killed 2 of them. He grinned. Correction, you killed 2 of them. I was just a distraction. Sirens wailed louder. Explosions rocked the ship. Somewhere out there, a battle was raging. Somewhere out there, freedom waited. Jace met Myra's eyes, and for the first time since their capture, there was no humor in his voice. Only steel. Let's show them what humans are really made of. The ship shook again, harder this time, rattling panels from the ceiling. The sterile white walls flickered with emergency red light, and the hum of the machines faltered before stabilizing. Somewhere down the corridor, a blast door slammed shut with the weight of a mountain. Jace wiped blood from his mouth, glancing at Mira as she shouldered the alien rifle like it was a broom handle she'd been handed without instructions. So, he said, you ever fire one of these before? No, she admitted. Her voice was clipped, efficient, but her eyes were still wide. She looked every bit the doctor she was, a healer holding a weapon that was never meant for her hands. But I've dissected more complicated things than a trigger. Jace smirked. Love the confidence. He bent down, stripping armor plates from one of the fallen Threx. The plates were too large, but he fastened a chest guard awkwardly over his torso anyway. Rule number 1 of surviving abductions: always loot the bodies. Mira shook her head but followed his lead, snagging a wrist device that blinked with alien script. It buzzed faintly when she touched it, scanning her hand. She half expected it to explode. Instead, a holographic map flickered to life. She blinked. Jace, this shows the ship layout. He whistled. Well, would you look at that? Seems the lizard boys didn't think we'd live long enough to need directions. The map showed their location, a lower deck lined with laboratories, and a pulsing blue marker that could only be the central hangar. Between them and escape, however, were 3 sealed security corridors, 1 reactor chamber, and a mess of red warning symbols Mira didn't like the look of. Hangars that way, she said, pointing. Jace tightened the stolen chest guard, hefting a jagged shard of metal like a knife. Lead on, document. They moved cautiously, every step echoing. The Dominion cruiser was massive, designed for intimidation, its architecture all sharp edges and choking corridors. Somewhere above, the battle raged, unknown attackers slamming into the Threx with relentless force. The walls trembled with impacts, and distant screams reverberated like trapped thunder. Mira kept her eyes on the holographic map, guiding them through twisting passages. Twice they ducked into alcoves as squads of Threx soldiers thundered past. Once, they nearly collided with a wounded scientist, dragging a cracked data pad. The alien froze at the sight of them, mandibles twitching in shock. Mira didn't hesitate. She shot him. Jace blinked. Remind me never to get on your bad side. I'm tired of being a lab rat, she muttered, voice icy. And tired of them assuming they know our limits. They pressed on, reaching the first security corridor. The blast doors loomed ahead, 3 meters thick, reinforced with alien alloy. No way through without authorization. Jace tapped the control panel, earning only a harsh screech of denial. Well, he muttered. That's discouraging. Mira studied the dead guard's wrist device. Wait. It scanned me earlier, maybe. She pressed the band against the console. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then the panel flashed green, and the door rumbled open with a groan. Jace grinned wide. Doc, remind me again why you didn't sign up for engineering instead of medicine? Because I don't like blowing things up. She glanced at him, then amended dryly. Usually. The corridor beyond was darker, lined with pipes and hissing steam vents. Jace squinted through the haze, every nerve on edge. He was waiting for the ambush. It came 30 steps later. A squad of Threx burst from the shadows, rifles blazing. Bolts of searing green energy screamed past. Jace dove left, Mira ducked right. She squeezed the trigger on her stolen rifle, sending a wild spray of plasma downrange. One Threx went down with a hole in his chest. The others fanned out, moving with predatory precision. Not to criticize, Jace shouted over the noise. But you shoot like you're throwing darts in the dark. Then you distract them, she snapped back. Gladly. He surged forward, weaving between shots. His shard of metal was pitiful compared to their rifles, but he didn't care. The nearest soldier aimed at him, too slow. Jace slammed into him shoulder first, driving the shard into the gap between armor plates. The Threx howled, collapsing. Two more turned their guns on him. Before they could fire, Mira steadied her rifle, exhaled, and squeezed the trigger with a surgeon's patience. One went down, head snapping back in a spray of dark blood. Jace grabbed the fallen rifle and spun, blasting the second before he could react. Breathing hard, Jace wiped grime from his forehead. Doc, he said, panting. Remind me never to make fun of your dart skills again. Noted, she replied, though her hands shook as she lowered the weapon. The corridor fell silent, save for the hiss of ruptured pipes. They stepped over bodies, pushing deeper toward the hangar. But Mira couldn't shake the gnawing thought. The Threx weren't just testing them in the lab. Every fight, every obstacle, it was all still part of the test. She didn't know how she knew, but she felt it in her bones. The second barrier came into view, a reactor chamber buzzing with unstable energy. The map insisted the only way forward was straight through. Mira hesitated, eyes scanning the volatile arcs of plasma spilling from ruptured conduits. Jace, if we go in there, we'll cook. He grinned. Then we won't stay long enough to get crispy. Before she could argue, he sprinted forward, ducking under a sparking conduit. Mira cursed and followed. Heat pressed against them in waves, like running through an open furnace. The air shimmered, choking. Sweat poured down Myra's face. Halfway through, an alarm wailed. A containment field dropped at the far exit, sealing them in. Oh, that's just cheating! Jace barked, slamming his fist against the barrier. The reactor roared, energy spiraling dangerously. The Threx weren't trying to kill them outright, just see how far they'd go before breaking. But that didn't matter. Dead was dead. Mira scanned the walls, eyes darting over control panels. Most were alien gibberish, but one showed a familiar icon, coolant flow. Without thinking, she pried the casing open and jammed her stolen rifle's barrel into the circuits. Sparks erupted. Coolant gas hissed, flooding the chamber in icy mist. The temperature dropped just enough. The barrier flickered unstable. Jace laughed breathlessly. You're a damn genius! He shoved his shoulder against the field, and this time it cracked like brittle glass. Together they forced it open, tumbling through as the chamber erupted behind them in a roar of plasma. They collapsed in the corridor, coughing, but alive. Limits, Jace panted, staring back at the chaos. Guess we still haven't found ours. Mira didn't answer. She was too busy noticing the figure standing ahead. Elira. The Threx captain herself blocked the corridor, flanked by two heavily armored guards. Her golden eyes burned like suns as she regarded them. You surprise me, she said slowly. Few survive the gauntlet. None thrive within it. Jace pushed himself upright, grinning despite the blood, bruises, and sweat. Thriving's kind of our thing. Elira tilted her head. You do not comprehend. This is no escape. This is data. Every step, every act of defiance, recorded. The Dominion thanks you for your service. The words hit Mira like ice. They weren't escaping, they were still inside the experiment. Even now, every move was being logged, every survival tactic measured. You're using us, she whispered, fury boiling in her chest. You're cataloging how far we can go. Correct. Elira's tail lashed the ground. And soon your people will be classified accordingly. Dangerous, but finite. Jace's grin widened. See, that's where you've got it wrong. We're infinite. You'll figure that out the hard way. Before Elira could respond, the ship shuddered violently. This time the tremor was different, deeper, closer. A muffled explosion tore through the decks above. One of the guards staggered, clutching his communicator. Alira's gaze sharpened. "The enemy breaches the hull," she hissed. She turned, issuing orders. For a moment, she forgot the humans. That was her mistake. Jace grabbed Myra's arm. "Now's our chance!" They bolted down a side corridor, ducking into maintenance shafts as the captain's voice roared behind them. Sirens howled. The ship groaned under external fire. Myra's lungs burned, her legs trembling. But she kept running. Because Jace was right. Their limits weren't what the Threx thought they were. Not even close. And as they neared the final barrier before the hangar, the sound of battle erupting outside told her one undeniable truth. Someone else had come looking for them. Whether friend or foe, she didn't know. But she was ready to find out. The hangar doors loomed ahead, massive slabs of alloy sealed with enough locking mechanisms to hold back an army. Jace skidded to a stop, chest heaving. Mira slammed into his shoulder, nearly collapsing from exhaustion. For a heartbeat they both just stood there, doubled over, drenched in sweat and grime. Then Jace lifted his head and grinned, teeth bloody but defiant. "Well, Doc, end of the line. Either we make it through that door, or we're space dust." Mira swallowed, her throat raw. The map on the stolen wrist device still glowed weakly, the blue marker pulsing just on the other side. Ships waited there, freedom, if they could get to it. But the thick blast door might as well have been a mountain. Before she could answer, the floor shuddered again. A deep, resonant boom rolled through the cruiser, followed by the unmistakable screech of tearing metal. Something outside had cut into the Threx hull. For the first time since their capture, Mira dared to hope. "Someone's breaching them," she whispered. Jace wiped grime from his forehead. "Question is, are they here for us, or just here to kill everyone?" Neither of them got to speculate further. From the shadows of the corridor behind them, a guttural voice snarled. "There they are!" A squad of Threx soldiers thundered into view, weapons raised. And at their head, Captain Alira. Her amber eyes burned with fury, her tail lashing behind her like a whip. Jace groaned. "Oh great! She's back. Can't get rid of her, can we?" Myra's grip tightened on her plasma rifle. She wasn't the same terrified prisoner who'd been strapped to a slab hours earlier. She'd killed, she'd endured, and she'd survived every trap these monsters threw at her. Fear still lingered, but now it was tempered with steel. Alira raised a clawed hand, halting her soldiers. "Enough running," she growled. "You have proven yourselves anomalies. But anomalies can be corrected." Jace stepped forward, squaring his shoulders despite the odds. "You keep talking like you know us," he said. "But the truth? You don't know a damn thing about humans." Alira's eyes narrowed. She gestured sharply. The soldiers opened fire. Bolts of plasma screamed down the corridor. Mira and Jace dove aside, pressed against the wall as green energy scorched the air. Mira fired back, striking one Threx in the chest. Jace rolled, grabbing a fallen weapon, and returned fire with manic precision. For a moment the hallway became chaos, shouts, gunfire, smoke. Then Alira herself surged forward, faster than anything that size had a right to be. Her claws slashed the air where Jace had been a second earlier. He threw himself backward, weapon clattering from his hand. The captain loomed over him, teeth bared in a predator's grin. "You break. Now." Her claw arced down, only to slam against the hangar bulkhead as Jace rolled clear at the last instant. Sparks flew. He scrambled up, hard hammering, and yelled to Mira. "We can't keep trading shots. They'll overwhelm us." Mira ducked behind a fallen crate, brain racing. He was right. The corridor was too narrow, the soldiers too disciplined. They needed something else. Something the Threx wouldn't expect. And then she saw it, the coolant pipes running along the wall, hissing faintly from earlier damage. If ruptured, they'd flood the passage with freezing vapor. The Threx armor was tough, but not sealed. Their reptilian physiology was vulnerable to rapid cold. "Jace!" she shouted. "The pipes! Hit the pipes!" He followed her gaze, eyes lighting up. "Oh, you beautiful genius!" He dove for a discarded rifle, aimed at the conduit, and fired. The plasma bolt slammed into the pipe. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the line exploded, releasing a torrent of icy mist that engulfed the corridor. The Threx soldiers roared in shock, their scales cracking under the sudden chill. Some stumbled, weapons dropping from stiff claws. Even Alira recoiled, steam rising from her armored hide. Mira didn't hesitate. She surged from cover, firing into the disoriented soldiers with cold precision. Jace joined her, grinning wildly despite the burning in his lungs. One by one, the Threx fell. But Alira did not fall. With a guttural roar, she tore free of the frost, her eyes blazing with unholy rage. She lunged at Jace, claws slicing the air. He barely raised his rifle in time, the weapon shattering under the force of her strike. He staggered back, blood splattering from a gash across his arm. Mira screamed his name, firing at the captain. Bolts slammed into Alira's armor, scorching black marks, but she kept coming, relentless. Jace dropped the ruined rifle, breathing hard. His grin faltered, but only for a second. Then he bared his teeth in a smile that was pure human stubbornness. "You think you've seen limits?" He spat, fists clenched. "Try this one." He charged. It was insane. Mira knew it, Alira knew it, anyone would have known it. A human throwing himself barehanded at an armored alien twice his size was suicide. But Jace didn't slow. He slammed into her with every ounce of adrenaline and rage left in his body. The impact wasn't enough to topple her, but it did drive them both back into the coolant mist. Frost crusted Alira's armor, her claws scraping against Jace's ribs as they wrestled. He shouted, raw and furious, refusing to let go even as blood ran down his side. Mira saw her chance. She dropped her rifle, snatched up the shard of alien metal Jace had carried earlier, and sprinted forward. With a cry torn from somewhere deep in her chest, she drove the shard into the cracked seam of Alira's armor at her side. The Threx captain howled, thrashing. Black ichor sprayed across the floor. Jace shoved with everything he had, forcing her back. Mira twisted the shard deeper, teeth gritted. With a final, guttural roar, Alira collapsed to her knees. Her burning eyes fixed on them, hatred mingled with something else, something Mira almost thought was respect. "Impossible," Alira rasped. "You should have broken." Jace leaned close, breathing ragged. "Yeah, well, we don't break. We bend. And we keep going." He yanked the shard free, and Alira toppled, motionless. For a long moment, the corridor was silent except for their gasping breaths. The coolant mist curled around them, ghostly in the emergency lights. Jace slumped against the wall, blood streaking his torn armor. Mira knelt beside him, checking his wound with shaking hands. "You're insane," she whispered. "Probably," he admitted with a weak grin. "But hey, it worked, didn't it?" Before she could answer, the hangar doors groaned. Metal screeched, shuddering as something on the other side forced them open. A blinding light spilled through the widening crack. The sound of gunfire, shouts, and the roar of engines thundered into the corridor. A silhouette appeared in the doorway, humanoid armored, carrying the unmistakable banner of Earth. Myra's breath caught. "Rescue!" Jace laughed, the sound half delirious, half joyous. "Took you long enough!" The Earth Marines stormed in, weapons blazing. They cut down the last surviving Threx with ruthless efficiency. One of them, a broad-shouldered sergeant with a scar bisecting his face, strode forward, lowering his rifle as he recognized the prisoners. "Command sent us to pull you out," he said gruffly. His gaze swept over Jace and Myra's battered forms. "Looks like you didn't exactly sit around waiting." Jace coughed, then winced at the pain. "We got a little restless." The sergeant's eyes flicked to Alira's fallen body, then back to them. "You did that?" Mira and Jace exchanged a glance. Mira nodded slowly. The Marine gave a low whistle. Guess the rumors are true. You people don't know when to quit. Behind him, the hangar was chaos. Earth ships battled Dominion craft in a storm of fire. Explosions shook the walls, but amidst the carnage, Mira felt something she hadn't since their capture. Hope. They weren't finished. Not by a long shot. But she also knew the fight wasn't over. Not yet. Because as the Marines hustled them toward the waiting dropship, Mira glanced back one last time at Alira's broken form. And in the dying glow of her eyes, Mira saw something chilling. The captain hadn't looked defeated. She'd looked intrigued. And Mira knew the threats would not stop here. Not after what they had seen. The Dominion had tested humanity's limits. And they'd discovered the truth. Humanity didn't have any. The station shook so violently that half the council thought it was coming apart, but Marcus stood firm. His boots magnetized to the floor, his eyes locked on the comm screen where the overseer's visage flickered, monstrous and terrible. Its many limbs twitched with a rage that was almost human in its intensity. The overseer of the Dominion was not used to defiance. Not from any species. Especially not from one it considered little more than up-jumped savages. You have gone far enough. The overseer growled, its voice resonating like steel being torn in half. Your species has no boundaries, no caution, no comprehension of survival. You will break here, human. And when you do, I will erase your world. Not a fragment of it shall remain. Marcus leaned forward, the chaos of alarms blaring around him, and said with calm precision. Funny thing about threats. We've been under them since we figured out fire. If extinction didn't take us then, it sure as hell won't take us now. The council chamber had become a war room. Holographic projections showed the Dominion fleet repositioning, deploying siege weapons designed to obliterate entire orbital structures in a single volley. Across the void, humanity's borrowed fleet looked pitifully small, cobbled together from a mix of Earth-forged warships and captured Dominion vessels now painted with crude human insignias. But every officer, every soldier, every technician knew this was the moment. The moment to show the galaxy what it meant when humans said, "Limitless." The Overseer's fleet opened fire. Lances of superheated plasma streaked through space, converging on the human ships. Several disappeared in the storm of light, torn apart before they could react. The rest scattered, moving in strange, chaotic patterns that looked like disorder to any alien strategist. But to Marcus and his commanders, it was instinct, unpredictability weaponized. Shift to scatter formation Delta! Marcus barked into the calm. Let them chase ghosts. Focus fire on their heavy carriers, cripple their logistics. The counselors clung to their seats, stunned that a human, just one human, was dictating battle against the most powerful empire in the galaxy as though it were a chess match. The Dominion was supposed to be flawless. Indomitable. Yet here they were, stumbling against an enemy that refused to behave according to the equations of war. The battle grew worse by the second. Dominion dreadnoughts closed in, their shields absorbing punishing barrages while their weapons cut swaths through the human line. But then something unexpected happened. The human ships didn't retreat. They surged forward. A frigate whose hull was already burning plowed straight into a Dominion cruiser, tearing it apart in a suicide strike. Another ship, stripped of half its weapons, fired its engines at full burn into the blind spot of a battleship, unleashing its last payload before detonating in a flash of white light. Madness, one counselor whispered, horrified. They're throwing their lives away. No, another corrected, shaking their heads slowly. They're trading lives for victory. They're showing us what it means to refuse defeat. Marcus coordinated every move with icy precision. To outsiders it looked like chaos, but he knew better. Humanity's strength had never been raw firepower, it was willpower, ingenuity, and the terrifying refusal to yield. He had told the council before, limits were for others. Humanity would gamble everything and keep fighting even when the math said they should be ash. The Overseer's visage twisted in frustration as human forces began crippling vital components of the Dominion fleet. Carriers exploded, ammunition depots were destroyed, and command ships were boarded by human marines who stormed their decks with reckless fury. Every act of defiance forced the overseer to commit more ships, more resources, more attention to what should have been a simple extermination. "You cannot sustain this," the overseer bellowed, slamming a clawed limb against the comm screen so hard that sparks burst in the background of its throne room. "Your kind will burn itself out before the cycle completes." Marcus allowed himself the smallest smirk. "You don't understand, do you? Burning out is what we do. We burn bright. We burn hot. And sometimes, when it looks like we're nothing but ash, we're still standing." As if to punctuate his words, a squadron of Dominion destroyers fell silent, their systems hacked and overridden by human code. Weeks earlier, human engineers had stolen Dominion encryption keys during what the overseer dismissed as petty raids. Now, those keys were turned against them. The commandeered destroyers spun in formation and unleashed fire upon their own allies. The council chamber erupted into pandemonium. Half the delegates cried out in shock, while others could only watch in awe. It wasn't simply that humans were winning battles, they were rewriting the very rules of war as it unfolded. No one else would dare throw away their ships, risk complete annihilation, or gamble with untested hacks in the middle of combat. But humans did. Humans always had. And slowly, impossibly, the balance shifted. The overseer realized it too late. What had begun as a show of punishment was now spiraling into disaster. The Dominion, a power that had ruled with iron certainty for millennia, was being humiliated by a species it hadn't even considered worth enslaving. In the chamber, Marcus finally cut the comlink. "No more speeches," he said flatly. "Let the galaxy watch what happens when you test the wrong species." The final stage of the battle was brutal. Human soldiers boarded the overseer's flagship, fighting room by room, hall by hall, with sheer ferocity. Many fell, but they pushed forward without pause, fueled by the knowledge that the entire galaxy was watching. When the command deck finally fell silent, it was not the overseer who stood victorious, but a bloodied human marine who planted a battered flag into the center of the room. The Dominion fleet, leaderless and broken, began to scatter. The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. Back in the council chamber, silence reigned. Marcus stood at the center, his uniform scorched, his face lined with exhaustion. And yet, his eyes carried that same unshakable fire. He looked around at the alien delegates, beings who had mocked, doubted, and dismissed humanity, and said, "Now you understand. We don't have limits. We don't stop. And if you think you can measure us, predict us, or cage us, you'll learn the same way the overseer just did." One of the counselors, voice trembling, finally asked, What do humans want?" Marcus exhaled slowly, a grim smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Simple. We want to live free. We want to explore, to fight, to laugh, to keep pushing forward no matter what tries to stop us. If that terrifies you, good. Maybe it should." The chamber remained quiet for several moments. Then, one by one, the delegates rose, not in defiance, but in acknowledgement. For the first time in history, the galaxy realized the truth. Humanity wasn't just another species clawing for survival. Humanity was the test. And they had just proved they were unbreakable. As Marcus turned to leave, he muttered under his breath, "They tested our limits. Turns out, we don't have any." And somewhere deep inside, even the most powerful beings in the galaxy felt a shiver of fear, and a spark of respect.